All right, everybody, it's the man they call Dave from the Working Fans Podcast. And today we got a fellow content creator, part of the YouTube channel over there at Watchamnia. He's behind the scenes. Also a former referee. He's going to tell us about his love of professional wrestling and some of his journey into professional wrestling today. Jesse Chapman. Jesse, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Who or what kind of got you into pro wrestling at first?
When I was a little kid, my dad and my brother would always watch wrestling together. It was the only thing my dad said that I would sit still for. I was always running around, but when wrestling was on, I would sit the whole 2 hours or whatever it was. And he said when I first watched it, according to my dad, the thing that really hooked me was LOD 2000. So the one good thing they did during that run, because I was watching it and I'd never seen in real life people with muscles that big and they had the face paint and it was like a real life superhero, And so I was hooked. Every week I got to watch these superheroes and supervillains on TV and it was just something I couldn't get enough of. I was hooked from day one.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I get that. So LOD 2000, yeah, definitely not their greatest run. Obviously,
no.
The Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, that's not what they talk about. But I can see, though, as a small child, powerful, like you said, big muscles. What professional wrestling were you really into then as you started to get older? Was it WWE? Was around the area? Or
so when I was growing up, I first started watching around 97. And I actually didn't know, surprisingly, being from Georgia, I didn't know about WCW until the Invasion angle. So after they were already gone. And so I was a big WWF kid. My favorites growing up, I really liked X-Pac. Triple H. I was a big DX kid. There was a lot of people, as time went on, it changed. Rey Mysterio came around. He was my favorite. Yeah. I was never the biggest guy in the world. So seeing somebody my size, that was cool. And then, Eddie Guerrero with all the stuff he would pull. And as I got older and started watching more stuff from the past, I got really into Owen Hart. Then I got into Japanese stuff and indies where I discovered Jon Moxley, and that was really cool. It's always been all over the place. I always say it depends on what day you ask me what I tell you what my favorite pro wrestler is. Right now I'm really into Kurt Angle, but it'll be different next week, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean he's an all-time great. There's no doubt about it. I was just talking about, for me, Chad Gable right now. I wish to do a little more with him, but he's a guy to me, man, if they want, he can be serious like Kurt. He has that background. He can be funny. He can do different things. You give him a heel, a baby face. It's man, this guy deserves more.
I feel like they really dropped the ball in making Jason Jordan Kurt's son. It should have been Chad. Yes. I understand, Jordan has the look that they prefer, and he's got the size that they prefer, but Gable, he has it all. He has the comedy quirks that Kurt had. He's incredible in the fucking ring. Just they really should do more with him, but I don't think they're going. I think he's going to be looked at the end of the day, kind of like Shelton Benjamin is, somebody who should have gotten more but never did.
Yeah, that'd be unfortunate, but I could see that. Did you get involved in any high school wrestling or anything too as you got older?
When I was in high school, they didn't offer wrestling any longer at my high school. I tried to get a wrestling team started. Yeah. The coach was like, well, you got the money to pay for it? I was like, nope, I sure don't. So that was the end of that.
Yeah, it seems like sometimes that's the journey. People try to do it in high school wrestling, and you ended up being a referee. Now, how did you get, what wrestling school did you go to? How did you get hooked up and actually getting your foot in the door in pro wrestling?
So this kind of started in high school. By the time I got to high school, it was the usual, they're more into girls, wrestling kind of takes a back seat. And then one day I was in a store and I saw this poster for this independent company called Flatline Pro Wrestling. And they were holding shows in Georgia, and I was like, you know what, I haven't watched wrestling in a long time, because at the time, WWE was deep in its PG stuff in the early to mid 2010s, and I wasn't about it. Growing up in the Attitude Era, it was painful to watch. So I saw this poster and I went to the show, and it had all this talent that went on to do bigger things. It had J.D. Drake, it had Anthony Henry, it had Cedric Alexander, just to name a few. And they were just stacked from top to bottom with talent. And I was fucking hooked. So there were two wrestlers there in particular that caught my eye. It was Anthony Henry and this guy named Ethan Case. And I was like, I want to break into the business, but if I want to get trained, I want to get trained by either one of these. I end up going to a shitty wrestling school closer to where I lived because neither of those two had a wrestling school at the time. And this, like, you show up, they got a ring, a terrible ring set up in the backyard, and it's something like that. But I was so eager to get into it, you know, I was like, let's do it. And they had me like taking moves before I learned how to bump, and it was a bad experience. And then a little bit after high school, there was this guy that I was friends with that had trained with Ethan Case at the school he opened up called the Palmetto Wrestling Academy in Columbia. They had some people drop out of their class, and they called me and they're like, hey, there's a spot open if you want it. And I had saved up money for it. So I took it to one of their shows that they put on because they had a company associated with a school called Palmetto Championship Wrestling. So I went to one of their shows, I gave them the money, and then I started my training with that school. And that's how that kind of went down.
How did you get yourself booked after you got out of wrestling school?
So I got out of wrestling school, and I went there to train as a wrestler, like I said before, but I couldn't get the hang of it. I wasn't athletic enough. And I'm kind of scramble brained, so like I couldn't remember the spots. And his way of teaching is he didn't like to call on the fly. He liked to do the whole Steamboat Randy Savage WrestleMania 3 the whole match beforehand. You know, that's cool. Some people do that, but it was very hard for me. So learning how to call in the ring would have been better. And like, don't get me wrong, he taught you how to call in the ring, but it was minimized compared to like going over every spot before. So I ended up becoming a referee, and I debuted with PCW, Palmetto Championship Wrestling. And the whole time, like even during school, you know, we're helping out different shows with ring crew and stuff, paying our dues. So I was already associated with this other company called PWX Pro Wrestling Experience in North Carolina. One of the very first shows that I helped out with them was a show that they brought in Jushin Thunder Liger for his retirement tour of the U.S. So I got to meet Liger, and that was cool. But those were like the main companies. And there's Turbo Pro Wrestling I was working with coming out. Just smaller companies within the area mostly. But PWX really was like the bigger of the three. And they had a working relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And that's how I got my foot in the door with them.
What'd you get to do with New Japan Pro Wrestling, I guess?
Essentially, I was seen as like a young boy for both PWX and New Japan. Around the time that I got to go work for New Japan, they were trying out their U.S. tour for the first time. So PWX, I was just getting my foot in to referee for them. I'd actually gone to a seminar for Kevin Pierce, who was their main referee, and who also refereed for New Japan. And he held sort of a competition, and whoever did the best in the seminar got booked on the show. And I won the competition, so I got booked for the PWX. It was almost like an NXT for PWX. I don't remember what the name of it is right now. But I got an opportunity to work for them. And then I got to tour with New Japan for the first U.S. tour. At the time, who was on it? You had Dave Finlay and Juice Robinson teaming up. You had Lance Archer, Tama Tonga. I can't remember everybody who was on the tour, but it was a pretty stacked lineup. And my job while I was touring with them is I would help with production. I would help set up the ring. And then right as doors were opening, I would help wherever I was needed. Sometimes I was working with the lines of fans to like go get autographs. Other times I was a grip. So for anyone who doesn't know what a grip is, I was holding the cable down outside the ring so the wrestlers didn't trip. And other times I was getting the shit beat out of me by Lance Archer whenever he made his entrance. So
Yeah.
and it's hilarious to see because I come up to maybe Lance's belly button. He's a lot larger than he fucking looks on TV.
Sure. He looks big on TV. So
Yeah. He's fucking huge. It was a great experience, and it helped me get my foot in the door. And I was like, as you can imagine, we're like a year, 2 years at most in the business, and we're touring with the biggest company in Japan, so we're fucking ecstatic.
Sure.
So the first tour ends in Atlanta, so we circle right back to where I'm from anyway. You know, we do this bill, you know, and then, you know, Lance Archer comes out, beats me up, and fucking the show's over, and that's the end of this tour. And they invite me and the rest of the PWX guys back to the next tour because they said we did such a good job setting up the ring and stuff, and everything was done on time, and they were very happy with us. And I'll tell you what date the tour ended on. It was like February or March of 2020.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the very next thing is the pandemic. Everything shuts down. that deal was automatically off the fucking table.
Wow, what timing. Jesus.
Yeah, as soon as I get my big break, the pandemic happens.
That's a bummer, man. So okay, so the pandemic happens. Is that kind of the end for refereeing at that point then, or did you ever get to try again? Or
So what happened after that is I kept training. So during the pandemic, I would still come up to the school where I trained at and keep things moving, and because I didn't want to get out of ring shape. So I was there constantly just training, keeping in shape, getting ready for whatever was next, because no shows were happening. Most people had lost their jobs, including me. I'd lost my job, my day job. So wrestling was just everything at that point. And at the time, there's a new class of people coming in to train. So I focused on helping train the next class and doing what I could for them. And it was the first class where Ethan kind of took a backseat in coaching. And there's this guy named Cody Fluffman, who works the South Carolina, Georgia Indies. And he was he's the one that helped get my foot in the door. We were friends when we were teenagers. So I was helping him train the classes. Time's going on and slowly shows are starting to open up again. But that New Japan deal was still off the table because they don't want, or they're not able to tour the U.S. again, So that when shows start to slowly open up, that's when I start to travel more and kind of go to other places I haven't been. We went up and we did some shows in Indiana for a company. It was a bunch of companies. I think it was Paradigm Pro Wrestling, and they were working with a couple of other companies at the time, and that's where I worked with guys like I can't remember his name, Beef something, and he actually played Terry Gordy in the Iron Claw movie.
oh wow, yeah. He's on the NWA, I think, now and stuff.
Yeah. I think that's right. And at this time, actually, I'm glad you brought up the NWA. I had a tryout with the NWA around this time. That kind of went nowhere, and it was weird because you think NWA and you think tryout, you think it's gonna you're gonna go to this big place and try out. It was held in a flea market, which I didn't expect, through this other company called Firestar in North Carolina. So I tried out with them. That kind of went nowhere. At the time, tensions are starting to build with me. And there was this guy I rode with, Cooper. Me and him were best friends. We rode shows together. He was my road wife. So tensions are building between me, Cooper, against the school, because the school was starting to show some shady colors. And I'm not gonna name drop anybody here, but we're seeing stuff that's going on in kind of a Me Too kind of way.
I got you.
And we're not cool with it, so we're calling shit out, and we're basically being told, hey, keep your mouth shut by the school. And so Cooper ends up leaving before I do, and he hooks up with this guy named Bob Keller, who has been wrestling for a very long time. And Bob Keller retrains him, and he goes on the road with him, and I kind of follow soon after. Bob Keller, he helps run production and stuff for TNA, and he also, I think, does some stuff with NWA, because one of the referees that rides with Bob is Jared Fritz, who officiates for the NWA. And so I end up having enough of the school and the shady stuff that they're into. So I end up following Cooper and working with them a little bit. But by that point, everything that went on with school kind of killed my passion for it. And I'm starting to focus more on YouTube and Twitch and doing all that stuff with some buddies of mine. And that's kind of where things start to slow down for me and come to an end. Cooper is still out there doing great things. His name is Cooper Housley. He's on Power Slap, owned by the UFC guys.
No kidding.
Yeah. So he competes on Power Slap and the Indies. If anybody ever sees him come near your town, tell him what's up. I actually just went to his wedding not too long ago. He married one of the referees from Ohio Valley Wrestling. And they recently had a tryout with CZW together.
Silas Mason, by the way, was the guy from played Terry Gordy in NWA. Anyone who's checking this, come on!
I had a very short kind of career, so that's how we got through this in about 20 minutes.
Oh, that's okay. That's interesting. So now you're involved. You got your YouTube channel, Watchamnia. What is Watchamania? What's it all about?
Watchamania was formed by me and this guy named Devin. Devin, I came across him because he was doing this. It was a wrestling watch-along thing where on YouTube, and I came across him and we got along, so we started hanging out some. We started Watchamania together. We couldn't think of a name, and I was like, Watchamania is cool, and he's like, no way, that's not fucking taken. And I looked and nobody had it. Or somebody did a long time ago. They hadn't used it in like a decade. So we used that, and we started our first content that we were doing is we were watching wrestling together, like on Twitch, because Twitch actually doesn't fucking shadow ban you for showing wrestling tape, which we surprisingly found out. As long as it's old, because he didn't start watching wrestling until like 2008, and so me and him started watching wrestling on Twitch together, like live under the Watchamania name from 1993, the first Raw, and we're watching WWF, WCW, and ECW. And it was kind of like a dynamic of like, I've seen this before. I'm kind of guiding him through watching the shit for the first time. Our schedules just got too busy for that, you know, like I started putting more stuff in my personal life, you know, like I started seeing someone and, you know, things get busy.
Yeah.
So I kind of took a backseat to it. Now he does like AEW watch-alongs where like he doesn't show it on the screen because it's on YouTube now, but he sits there and talks with everybody while they're watching and chat. We also have this side channel for video games called the WM Network, and we do this thing in there that I kind of was inspired to create by watching like early UFC when they had the tournaments and shit. And what we do is basically we set a limit for like a time limit for people who want to join. We take a video game, the champion, whoever the champion is at the time picks the video game. And it's usually a wrestling game because it has to be like CPU versus CPU. They randomize the characters, and the characters represent a member of the community. And then the tournament like fucking happens, and at the end of the tournament, the winner of the tournament faces the champion in the game. The winner picks the next game basically in the stipulation. And so it's just something that we could fucking, you know, do with our community and they're really into, and we have all kinds of games and shit that are super interactive.
Awesome. No, that's good. That always is the best. Those interactive games are great. I like that you can kind of pick the stipulations there. That's pretty cool. Thanks for joining us today. So Watchamania, thank you so much for doing this and good luck with everything, man. Appreciate you, fam.